Oh, well, hello and welcome everyone to the knowledge series, The Business Case for Financing Women. I'm very glad you made it to the last session of the day. It has been a couple of interesting and long days, but today is a very exciting session still to come, showcasing private sector institutions financing women in innovative ways. My name is Sabine and I will be leading you through the session. I'm sure you've heard this before, but just a few housekeeping rules before we kick off. So please kindly keep the microphones on mute when you're not talking and turn the video on when speaking so we can see all your beautiful faces. There will be a keynote and an exciting panel discussion to look forward to in the next 60 minutes. And after the panel discussions, you can also post your questions in the chat box. And then we'll have the panelists answer to it. The session also will be recorded. So without further ado, I'll be very excited to kickstart the session. And let me please introduce you to Christine Angstrom, Director of the Private Sector Financial Institutions Division, for her opening remarks. Christine, please.
Great, thank you, Sabina. It's my pleasure to be here with you all today and to see some familiar names out in the audience. There is a unity that comes from all of us having ongoing discussions with enthusiasts on gender responsive lending, such as our wonderful speakers today. In this session, we want to place a spotlight on some of the interesting work that financial institutions are undertaking in this space. We're excited to hear from founders of neobanks and business heads of financial institutions about their experiences on using creative business models to finance women. So why is this panel important? ADB is committed to accelerating gender equality in Asia and the Pacific, as I'm sure that you've heard throughout this forum. Advancing women's equality can reduce poverty and boost economic growth. We at ADB therefore believe that helping women and girls must be a priority in our developing member countries. And that is why gender mainstreaming is so important. We've seen quantitative evidence and best practice examples of how gender equality strengthens national economies. We've also heard in different webinars and forums how organizations and institutions have highlighted the rationale for the private sector to close gaps between men and women. But even though there's been much said about the business case for financing women, financial institutions still face challenges servicing women entrepreneurs and then women-owned and led small and medium-sized enterprises, and they themselves have difficulties accessing finance. The percentage of women SMEs remains considerably small. Total bank lending to this sector stands at only about 19% in our region. More broadly, the global credit gap for lending to women SMEs is enormous, totaling to an estimated $1.7 trillion. This is one of the reasons why ADB's Private Sector Financial Institutions Group has been working for a number of years with various bank and non-bank partners throughout the region to reduce the gender financing gap. Recently, just in August of this year, we launched a new initiative at ADB called the Women's Finance Exchange to support partner financial institutions and their women borrowers through innovative digital solutions to improve access to finance for their female clients. The Women's Finance Exchange was born out of the need to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic risks of losing decades of progress on women's financial empowerment. In the coming months, we're excited to look for new partners to increase the funding windows for FIs and ultimately their female clients. We'll do this while strengthening the business case for financing women through webinars such as the one we are hosting today and sharing that knowledge. And so let me turn this back over to Sabina to kickstart our session today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christine. And thank you also for joining at these odd hours because in the US it's very early morning. So I would like to introduce as our keynote speaker, Joanne Corcoran. She is the co-CEO and managing partner of Golden Seeds, which is a private equity and venture capital firm based in the US. She'll be speaking about the opportunities on funding female founders. Due to the time difference, and given that's also Thanksgiving in the US today, we had to pre-record her session. So please just sit back, relax, and enjoy.
Hello, I hope you're enjoying the conference. This recording is a very condensed summary of the investment thesis we use at Golden Seeds to build an attractive portfolio of female founded companies. I hope it piques your interest. Let me tell you about Andy, your prototypical tech founder. Andy has 15 years of experience in the sector in which NewCo is innovating. NewCo has developed a novel way to disrupt a multi-billion-dollar market. Andy goes to the venture capital market for funding. What are the chances of getting funded? Overall, chances are slim. Typically, VCs fund 1% to 3% of the deals they see. However, if Andy were a nickname for Andrew, his chances would be much higher than if Andy was a nickname for Andrea. If Andrea does receive funding, she will, on average, receive significantly less than Andrew. Despite less funding, Andrea will likely generate more revenue with the capital she does receive. Golden Seeds sees founders like Andrea as an opportunity, and we started investing in founders like her 15 years ago. Gender lens investing in venture capital is often viewed as an impact-only strategy, where investors need to sacrifice returns. But the reality is that it's a strategy able to generate attractive, possibly even above market returns in both the public and private equity markets. There is a long history of studies showing market outperformance of public companies that have a higher level of gender diversity in management. Here's just one chart from a recent Credit Suisse Gender 3000 report. It shows that the closer management is to gender parity, the better share price performance. And indeed, gender diversity in US public companies continues to improve as the positive effects of diversity are recognized. Let's quickly shift to the US private equity markets. Again, just one data point from one recent study by BCG and Mass Challenge, a very, very large US accelerator program. The result, women-led companies received significantly less investment, and yet those women-led companies generated 2 times more revenue per dollar invested after just 2 years. Despite data like that, the venture capital markets in the US have been very slow to react. In 2020, US venture capital invested over $140 billion. Still, female founders and even gender diverse leadership teams barely register on this chart, and there's been minimal change over the last 5 years. At Golden Seeds, we see this as an opportunity to make attractive investments. Through our group of individual high net worth investors and our funds, we've invested over $150 million in female founders. And those companies have gone on to raise over $1.7 billion in follow-on capital. A compelling sign that there are attractive investment opportunities led by women if you take the time to look. If it isn't a lack of quality investment opportunities, what is it that keeps female founders underinvested? There's no definitive answer, but there are multiple academic studies that point to unconscious bias. One soft form of unconscious bias is that many investors expect female founders to be disproportionately involved in food, clothing, or childcare. Of course, women start companies in those areas, but women also start companies in all sectors. Women in the US have been earning an increasing percentage of STEM degrees, and we see the result of this in the variety of female-led companies that come to us for funding. This chart is a sample of technology companies in our portfolio. They range from next-generation battery architecture to medical devices and diagnostics to advanced materials and industrial manufacturing. The research also shows other, more insidious forms of unconscious bias beyond the soft bias of low expectations. This chart is from a study published in the Harvard Business Review. That study found that unconscious bias led to male and female founders being asked different questions during identical pitch sessions. At the earliest stages of funding, female founders were asked more risk-related questions, while male founders were asked more questions about growth and return potential. Each risk question reduced the chances of and the total amount of equity funding entrepreneurs received. So promotion questions focus on the opportunity. How big is this market? How fast can this market grow? Prevention questions focus on risk. How are you going to retain customers? What are the execution risks you face? While prevention questions are a necessary part of due diligence, when they become the major focus, such questions can stifle investors' ability to look at the possible upside opportunity at the early stages of fundraising. This is a universal implicit bias. Male and female investors are prone to this bias when asking questions of female founders. Fortunately, being aware of implicit bias can help shift behavior. At Golden Seeds, we actively work with investors and train them to be aware of implicit bias when making investment decisions. Our experience proves that there is value in funding females. The $150 million we've invested at Golden Seeds is already worth more than $240 million in proceeds returned and unrealized increases in equity value. I hope this very abbreviated presentation shows you that funding female founders can be where impact meets opportunity. And I ask you to think about gender equity when allocating assets in your private markets portfolio. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Let's see if I'm actually on unmute. Sorry, yes. Well, quite a convincing story on how to successfully support women entrepreneurs. And this is also, I think, a very great link to the upcoming panel, where our speakers likewise have very interesting stories to tell. The panel will be moderated by my colleague, Amanda Satterley, who heads up the gender team in our private sector operations department, working with the investment teams to integrate gender in their projects. So please stay tuned, and over to you, Amanda.
Many thanks, Sabine. Thank you everyone for joining us. And of course, thank you to our director of PSFI, Christine Angstrom, for her opening remarks and welcoming us. Christine clearly demonstrated in her presentation about the need for financing, to think that 1.7 trillion of a financing gap for women-owned SMEs, it just presents such a huge business opportunity. And that's what we heard from Joanne, as she just presented then via video. There's this enormous business case for women. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be, I'll introduce in a minute 4 amazing panelists. All of them are innovators. I feel very blessed to be able to share their knowledge and insights with you. So let me first of all introduce each of them. We have Vipul Seksaria. He is a co-founder of Kaleidofin, which is a neobank in India. In case you don't know what the term neobank means, I didn't. It means it's a virtual or digital bank, which operates largely online, without the sort of more traditional bricks and mortar. So this is sort of the new big thing. You know, Vipul will be sharing with us the why and the how. You know, why did they start this digital platform, and how is it that it's benefiting 1 million underbanked female and male customers in India? Then we're going to be also talking with Debbie Watson. Debbie is a co-founder, another founder, amazing people. She's the co-founder and CEO of Lucy. Lucy is also a neobank, It's launched out of Singapore. It's very exciting. It's focused on entrepreneurial women, and their sort of mission is to help these entrepreneurial women become unstoppable, which is a fantastic way to phrase it. She'll be sharing with us in a minute about her innovative offerings. Next, we will have, we'll hear also from Vineet Sukuma, and he is the founder and CEO of several companies. One of them is called Vivriti Asset Management, and he is also a co-founder of Vivriti Group. These companies, one of them has India's largest debt platform called Cred Avenue, and it has already processed $9 billion through the platform. So we look forward to hearing how this amazing business is benefiting both female and male-owned businesses. And then lastly, we have Rasudan Bharatshvili. She's the head of small and medium enterprises value-added service creation at Bank of Georgia. So Bank of Georgia is the leading retail bank, and she is responsible for, in her role, for innovating within the bank, which, you know, working at ADB myself, I understand comes with its unique set of challenges, but also opportunities. So she is designing products for female-owned SMEs, and she'll be sharing her innovations, particularly as they adapted through the COVID pandemic. So first of all, let me go to Vipul and ask for him to kindly share, as the co-founder and of KaleidoFin, what is it in India? You know, what was it that made you decide to create this organization? You know, what is the why here? What was the business case that you saw that made you decide to found this organization?
Thank you, Amanda. I'm just checking if I'm audible.
Yes.
Thank you very much, and greetings from India to everyone. So just coming to the question straight, I think we have KaleidoFin now for about 3.5 years, and while we were thinking about it, finance is generally considered very black and white, and the name KaleidoFin itself started from that. How could we add color to lives of people who can benefit from finance, and in the process make finance more colorful, and that's how Kaleidoscope and KaleidoFin comes into play. The primary thesis at KaleidoFin was that customers today, primarily women customers, were our target segment, and we knew women customers were gateway to the household in some sense. They were highly motivated, highly aligned to the interests of the household, whether it is the larger family group, the children, their education, the business. The overall alignment was very high and the motivation was very high. So what we thought was that how do you make financial solutions intuitive for women customers? Unfortunately, while there could be let's say a smartphone in a household today, but oftentimes it may not be owned by the women customer. It could be some male member, sometimes teenagers who own it. So we had to think about from the point of view of the women customer. And the first construct that we got in here, Amanda, was what we call as a goal-based solution. You put in a goal in front of you. Let's say education for my children is why I need the money. I want to expand my small enterprise is why I need the money. And make it as sort of the center point of the whole sort of interaction that we do with the customer on the ground. So all our solutions have a goal set. Each women customer first vividly describe as to why are they sort of looking at finance, what type of goal do they have in mind. And then we sort of create a suite of instruments, starting from credit to insurance to even investments and savings, to carve out a persona-based, a customized financial solution that can help the women customer achieve the goal. So that was the thesis, that goals is what can make it intuitive, because terms and conditions, lots of clauses, black and white, can make it very confusing. How can we keep that simple? How can we keep the interface simple? How can we make it available at the doorstep of the customer and made goal sort of speak to the customer as to why they should come into this. And so the idea was to sort of tap into this highly motivated member of the household who actually all times have a financial sort of role to play at the household, but may not have the equal amount of sort of scope or opportunity as the primary sort of member to come in the financial decision stage. So we reached out to women customers through this goal-based approaches is how we thought about it. And today we use we offer savings, investments, and credit through this platform. We've built rails of payment solutions so that this can happen, because everything requires payments, and payments which can run on a feature phone, because this customer is not necessarily comfortable with smartphone. So that's how we thought about Kaleido Fed.
Super. Thank you, people. We will circle back. There's a lot to unpack there. I particularly like the way that you describe women as the gateway to the household. And I noted that you spoke about a goal-based solution. You know, I really like that idea, like sort of, you know, really anchoring it onto something that women felt tangible and they wanted to achieve. So thank you for sharing that. I can imagine why that's been a very winning business solution. So we'll go now to Debbie, who, as I mentioned, has developed a neobank. I'm so proud that I know what that means. A neobank in Singapore, and she talks about how she has built this for entrepreneurial women who are overlooked and underestimated and underbanked. Lucy, please tell us some more about, you know, who did you decide to target in Singapore? Why Singapore? What was the business opportunity that you saw there?
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, one of the interesting things is I think probably a lot of people on this call will have this sort of popular misconception that everything is sort of roses in Singapore and everybody is rich and it's all perfect, right? And actually there are some fairly underserved segments. And so, you know, what kind of drove the sort of reason to start Lucy, I guess, in the first place was based upon my experience. And I've been sort of living in Asia now for 21 years and worked in about 35 countries across Africa and Asia. And, you know, one of the things that I'd seen, which backed out what sort of keynote speakers and so forth was saying, was that wherever you go in the world, you see that at least 50% of small businesses are being run by women. But whenever you go into banks, as I was doing when I was advising financial institutions, you see that pretty much all of the bank management are male. And a kind of result of this has been that women have very much been actually overlooked as having entrepreneurial potential. There's lots of statistics about this kind of thing, obviously. It's like the low percentage of business loans that are given to women-owned businesses compared to men. And so actually the idea for Lucy really was not particularly initially focused on Singapore, but was based upon what I'd seen in all the different countries that I worked in, which were sort of geographically, socioeconomically, very, very different from each other, was that there was this kind of underlying common bond, which was that female entrepreneurs were just generally drawing the short straw when it came to most things. And so I was already in Singapore anyway, and you know, Singapore likes to proclaim itself as the sort of the hub here of fintech in the region, and certainly it's a very enabling environment and a good place to have a regional base. And so one of the things that I'd done really was based upon my experience in the past. A lot of the work I've done before has been on customer-centric product design and sort of value proposition design for different segments. And so I kind of applied this to Singapore and said, well, while we're going to be starting with a base in Singapore, let's see like what there is, like what gaps there are in Singapore, and found out that there were quite a lot. And so it kind of made sense as our first step really was to focus on seeing if we could solve the problems of underserved segments in Singapore. And what we've really done is identified two very clear and distinct segments, one of which is the foreign domestic workers or helpers or maids, as they are variously called. And there are 250,000 of them in Singapore, predominantly coming from 3 countries being Philippines, Indonesia, and Myanmar, who are pretty much completely ignored by the banks. But they are, of course, by their very nature, entrepreneurial. I mean, they've up sticks, left their kids behind. As we say, you know, they've left their children behind to come and look after yours, right? And they've done this with a reason. And the reason is not that that's what they wanted to do, but their aim is to save enough money to start a small business and go back home and be with their kids. And so we kind of recognize that there is this entrepreneurial potential in women who are coming from countries that are very much sort of micro enterprise driven, but that just everything is conspiring against them to kind of prevent them from going back with anything significant to show for it. Just put this in context a little bit, 60% of foreign domestic workers return home with nothing to show. And that's just ridiculous and huge. The second group was micro and home-based entrepreneurs who are, again, predominantly women, a lot of whom are women who are returning to the workforce in some kind of way or juggling this around household management. And again, what we've seen is whoever we spoke to, regardless of what kind of little business they were running, regardless of whether they were doing home baking to make a couple of $100 extra or were consulting and earning $1,000 a day, they were all facing the same issue. And this was really, first of all, that the banks weren't interested in supporting them in any kind of way because they're not salaried. But secondly, that was this recognition that entrepreneurship is scary and it's lonely. And a vast percentage of people, particularly running their own small businesses from home, actually feel really quite lost on what they're supposed to do next. And so what we kind of tried to do as well with this particular group was also to look at this holistically and say, what is it exactly that people really need here to help them to start and grow their own businesses? And we took it from that standpoint of really understanding these two groups and kind of threw all the preconceived notions of like what standard products and things should look like completely in the bin and said, we're going to actually be driven by what is it that's really going to solve the pain points and help realize the aspirations of both of these two segments.
Fantastic. Wow. We can't wait to hear more about it. So that's a staggering statistic that you said that 60% of workers returned home with nothing. And your other group being the micro and home-based, I think you described it really well when you talked about the fact that it's very lonely for them to be sort of trying to figure out how to where to go next, get those business skills, get that support. I can just imagine that, no one would be interested in banking them. So I can see why you focused on those two market segments. That makes a lot of sense. Okay, let's now move over to Vineet. Vineet is also in India, the same as Kaleidofin. Vineet, as I mentioned, is a co-founder of Cred Avenue. Vineet, we'd love to understand, what is it that, that your platform offers specifically for women, and why did you, when you think about Cred Avenue and the work that you're doing, how do you think about women in that market segment? Like, what is the business case for you as you think about, because I know that you reach out to both men and women, but what is it that when you're thinking about your female customers using Cred Avenue, what is that business case that you see when you're trying to target them with your services?
Right. When we started Cred Avenue around 4.5 years back, the objective was to create a free and fair marketplace for debt. And very rapidly, we realized that the most significant market that required this kind of price discovery as well as free and fair sharing of information, disintermediation between pools of capital and the real use of money would be the very large retail finance market in India, of which a significant segment is unsecured lending to women in the form of microfinance. Now, microfinance today is a market that comprises of, I would say, several million borrowers today, cutting across the length and breadth of the country. And the complexity of India is massive, right? These women today have been empowered by small ticket loans. These loans are ranging from $100 to $1,000, depending on the extent to which the borrower has been in the market. And the providers of this money range from non-profits to for-profit lending companies, which are called microfinance institutions, which then in turn approach the wholesale markets for refinance. Right now, when we built CredAvenue as a platform, we rapidly realized that a very large pool of such lending institutions, be it in the north, west, south, or east of the country, lack efficient access to capital markets. And the reason being that there is a significant information asymmetry, but also because transaction flow and transaction execution is not today digitized in India at all for any part of the Indian market. Right? CredAvenue today is a digitized market that provides for discovery, which means finding good quality companies to lend to. It allows for investment assessment, which means both the company and the transaction can be assessed digitally. Provides for execution, which means an end-to-end digital experience on execution. And finally, and most importantly, it provides for monitoring the asset until the maturity of the asset. Right? So discovery, investment execution, and investment assessment, execution, and portfolio monitoring can be done digitally end-to-end of CredAvenue. Right? And this is the platform that has now done $9.5 billion of business the last 4.5 years. But a very significant share of this has been in the Indian microfinance segment, where the last mile of credit goes to women who are extremely empowered. There's more and more evidence has built up through the last 15 years that micro lenders have succeeded in many parts of India in breaking the jinx around right from asset ownership to business ownership to their ability to really manage the household as well, and provide necessary working capital for them to run small and micro businesses. There is mounting evidence on how microfinance has helped such women borrowers through natural disasters, through the recent pandemic, as well as through very, very tough economic situations as well. Now, how does CredAvenue really help in this entire chain? As I mentioned, the chain leads from the women entrepreneur who is running a business, seeking a working capital finance, from a microfinance company, which in turn approaches wholesale markets for refinance. Right? Now, that refinance needs to come at acceptable terms. Right? India today has been successful, and we can potentially lay some stake of claim to that, of having the lowest rates in microfinance in the world. Right? There are markets in Latin America, in Eastern Europe, in Africa, etc., where microfinance happens at 50% to 100% rates. India, the lowest rate is 17% today. Right? And that's on account of how efficiently capital markets have provided refinance to the last mile lender. Right? Today, there are the largest banks in the country are today managing portfolios that contain millions of micro loans, because CredAvenue is able to provide them risk management and a view of the last mile risk on individual loans. Right? Imagine India's largest a bank like the State Bank of India, which is India's largest bank, buying a pool of 1 million microloans, right, through a securitization, right? And SBI today does not have the technology to be able to assess and reassess the quality of that pool on an ongoing basis. If SBI is unable to do it on an ongoing basis, they will not buy again, right? And that's where CredAvenue steps in to be able to run detailed loss estimations on that book to be able to give contract level visibility of performance, to be able to run loss estimation metrics through the life of the transaction, and essentially and fundamentally build so much ecosystem on performance of this transaction that they're able to do this again and again and again.
Fantastic, thank you. So what's really interesting there is, as you said, because you're making the microfinance sector and the financing of it and the refinancing of it more efficient through digitization. Through that, you're actually having enormous impact on women, because as we all know, microfinance is the majority of customers are women. So what you're able to do is reach scale, which is what you need in India, using a digital platform, and you're making each stage of the process more efficient. That's really, I can see why you've managed to reach the scale that you have already, because it's clearly a need in the marketplace, and it's clearly having huge impact on female microfinance borrowers. Fantastic. Okay, let's now move to Risadan. Thank you for your patience. Definitely, last but not least, we're very excited to speak to you about the work that you do, Risadan, in Bank of Georgia. You head up the SME Value Added Services Department. Please talk to us about you've created programs that focus on women-owned businesses, and why did you decide to focus on women-owned businesses? What was the business case that Bank of Georgia saw, and how did that work that you do, how did that adapt during the COVID pandemic? What was the influence on the work that you do as a result of what we're all still living through?
Hello, Amanda. Hello, audience. I'm delighted to be here and to talk about what I do. We in the Bank of Georgia's SME Value Added Service Development Department focus on helping SMEs in Georgia reach their maximum potential by helping them with consulting, with information, help them digitalize business operations, and make them more effective. With bank SMEs, we constantly listen to them and help where help is needed. Pandemic, we saw that women who owned businesses were already strong and accomplished women, and the only thing we could do is provide them with education. For them and for other SMEs, we created online educational platform, businesscourse.gym, which provides short courses about business in Georgian language, which was essential. However, our main focus then was more on women who needed empowerment to start business if they wanted to. So what we did was many webinars to help women overcome their fears of risk-taking, talk to them about branding themselves and their businesses, and did lots of experience sharing from strong business women to those who were about to start business. For example, the founder and head of Farmer Association, who is a woman, was talking to women who were about to start agro-business about her experience, her challenges, and her ways to overcome challenges. A female board member of Bank of Georgia was talking to our female startup business clients. Thus, she was setting example that women are effective and excellent in business. However, when pandemic started, we identified that women who owned businesses and who were strong before also faced many challenges, such as digitalization of the sales and digitalization of the business processes. So we switched the focus and helped women-owned businesses meet this change time demanded from them, and we helped them to digitalize sales and processes.
Super. Thank you very much. I had a bit of a sound problem. I'm not sure if others did as well. I hope they were able to hear you. But what I did pick up was, and what's been really interesting about the COVID pandemic is that it's been a catalyst for moving people into the digital space. And what you said was key around making sure that women-owned SMEs and female entrepreneurs, that they had that skill set available to them to be able to transfer. As you said, you help them move sales online, you help them move their marketing online, and that must have been incredibly powerful for those women to be able to not only maintain their business, but in some instances, what we saw is that some people in the right places, with digital, managed to grow their businesses. So that's fantastic. So we're going to, I'm just checking time. We've got time to circle back through our panelists and hear a little bit more. So what we've talked about so far is sort of the why and the, what was the business case, what was the need? And now we're going to dive a little bit deeper into the how. So, how did each of these innovators, reach women and grow their businesses? So Vipul, I'm going to circle back to you and Kaleidofin. What is interesting is that each of you have used digital in your solutions. As you speak a little bit more about your sort of, how you reach women, I'd be keen to understand, where have you seen that technology is also a barrier? So, technology can get you so far and digital can get you so far, but then actually you need to accompany that sometimes, and I'm keen to hear your view about non-technical offerings. Where did you find the limit to technology, and where did you need to bring in sort of offline support or other services to support women to take advantage of the opportunities?
Yeah, no, thanks, Amanda. I think just starting by saying that there was an inherent handicap in the customer segment that we're serving, in terms of, like I was saying, access to smartphones or digital assets through which, let's say, one can create an underwriting framework. Like Vineet was saying, a majority of the customers in India today, women customers today, get very small ticket loan sizes, primarily in the, let's say, downwards of $1,000, like you said. So what happens is that many of these women customers today, over a period of time, have been getting this access to credit through microfinance companies, and have reached a stage where today their enterprises have grown and their requirements have grown. Today they may need larger ticket size loans. They have set up their individual enterprises, either individually or with a family member, and still go back to the microfinance institution to take more than one loan, sometimes 2 to 3 loans, to essentially meet their requirement, because bigger ticket size loans are not available. And why are they not available? Because there is lack of data, there is lack of smartphone usage, there is lack of a digital payment behavior. And many of these are sort of requirements for you to get access to a certain ticket size in the lending space. Or otherwise you continue to sort of get constrained at a certain sort of top level. So what we were trying to do here, Amanda, I mean, through our platform now, we have given over a little over 1 million loans to the tune of about 50 billion Indian rupees for our partners that use some of our technology. And we basically looked at alternate data sets. We created credit models where the 1 million loans that we gave away, close to 60% were above $1,000. And 97% or 95% were to women borrowers in this group. So we could do this because we leveraged various alternate data sets. We could do this because we created a payment platform that was not reliant on let's say a smartphone alone, and still create a digital payment sort of history, so that now lending can happen in this space, which so far has not been accessible. Now, these were things that we could solve, but there were other barriers. For example, communication in vernacular language is necessary. It's a softer aspect, but if most of terms and conditions, like Debbie was saying, Banks are men driven conventionally, very much in India, not very different. And customers are women. And there could be even sort of barriers around how do you sort of very transparently communicate the terms and conditions of the product. If it's only going to be written, how are you going to do that? So we use voice in a big way, interactive voice technology in a manner that customers can understand in a choice language. We went to the dialect of the language. India has multiple languages, 15 plus languages. Each language is multiple dialects. So even if you speak the language in a certain most known dialect, may not be understood. So to be able to send these offers out to the clients to receive their inquiries back on the credit model that we created, which led to 60% of these borrowers to graduate from small tickets to larger tickets, to use various other ancillary services. Among them was voice, among them was assistance, a feet on street that can now talk to the customer in their language. We also looked at listen rates when we send these voice messages, that how many customers are able to get the message in one go. Where are we getting queries back so that we need to change the message? So it was a combination of things that we could solve upfront by creating access to data and sort of the graduation of the customer from one ticket to the other ticket, creating these digital payment technologies which could work without a smartphone being present. These voice-based solutions that have helped us sort of cover a part of the journey. Barriers continue to remain. I think all of these, while these numbers sound very interesting, there's a much larger population to serve, and we're still trying to figure out what more can we do. So we have created image-based communication. So today, even if you have, let's say, WhatsApp is very common in India today, and many women customers use it, but you don't read or write on WhatsApp that easily. You can respond to images. So we've created WhatsApp bots to respond to images, to answer questions, and essentially get more engagement and more responses from the customer. So this is what we've been doing, and I think it's a journey at this point of time.
Wow, that's really impressive. You know, I like how you saw the challenge, but you didn't give in, and you found that technical solution that would enable you to address what would otherwise have been a really big barrier. I love the idea of interactive voice. And even, you know, I've never even heard of this before, to use images on WhatsApp and to have a bot that can recognize images and respond to that. These are fantastic ideas. And of course, the alternate data sets, you know, it's like the holy grail, right, is to find a way that we can use other data that women are creating every day. You know, how can we capture that and make that meaningful to help them access finance? So, wow, some really, really great innovations in there. Thank you, Vipal. Thank you for those examples. Excellent. Okay, moving on to Debbie. Debbie, would love to hear more about Lucy and what you see next. I got the feeling chatting to you earlier that you are, you know, you have a bigger vision, and that Singapore is your first step. You talked about the 2 market segments you're targeting there. I'd love to hear how you see Lucy sort of moving, into which new areas, which markets, which segments, or are you still figuring that out? I'd love to hear a little bit more about that, please.
Yeah, well, it's actually interesting because when I started Lucy, given all the places I'd worked in and all the people I knew, when I'd kind of said what I was going to do, people were saying, wow, like, we need Lucy here. Yeah, it was everywhere from like Ethiopia to Pakistan to Papua New Guinea to England, because it was kind of recognized, I think, everywhere that women entrepreneurs were really in need of being more supported in different ways. And I think particularly now since COVID, of course, right, and the number of retrenchments, it was disproportionate number of women who've been retrenched. And you've got a lot more women now actually starting up small businesses. I mean, in Europe, for example, the year-on-year growth last year in new business registrations was 40%. 40%. It's like huge. So you've got a whole bunch of people, say, across all socioeconomic divides, doing all sorts of different things, who are trying to get started and kickstarting their small businesses. So I've kind of very much seen that this is something that is ultimately kind of going to be transferable pretty much everywhere. And so given my own personal background, which has been, so the last 20 plus years in doing customer-centric product design and leveraging technology in pretty much everywhere, including, I have to say, in Georgia, my favorite country, Risadan, in the whole planet, my favorite place. I'm a one-person tourism board, actually, for Georgia. But you know, one thing, again, it's like what I learned was the approach is to really being very specific in understanding particular segments and not assuming that things are just portable from one country to another or one region to another, or you know, urban to rural to peri-urban to whatever it happens to be, and they're all very different, right? And so our approach is very much going to be understanding each different group that we move into, and really what their unique challenges and pain points and aspirations really look like, so that we can make it very relevant. But that said, I mean, you know, the logical next steps for us really are in two key areas in Southeast Asia, one of which is following the remittance flows of the foreign domestic workers. So with the particular focus, I'd say, on the Philippines and Indonesia, because they are very micro enterprise driven countries. There's invariably a little business at the other end that needs empowering, and actually in a lot of cases the helper is trying to kind of manage it remotely in some kind of way, and trying to make it sort of successful while doing her day job at the same time. So we see that as being a kind of ideal entry point, if you like, to follow this remittance flow to empower these small businesses at the other end and go out from there. The other kind of obvious choice for us is Hong Kong, because it's demographically very similar to Singapore, has the same underlying issues, because I know a lot of people that live there, so they've said, yeah, problems you're talking about, exactly the same in Hong Kong. 400,000 foreign domestic workers from the same countries. And so it kind of makes sense to really look at joining the dots there. But, you know, I mean, if we even with just this kind of approach, we can look at most of the Middle East and so forth too, as I say. But what we've really just done is the way that we have designed Lucy as a neobank is that we can sit on top of anybody's license. It's already pretty much plug and play. So that we can kind of work with any financial institution and really just connect into their platform. And in effect, what this enables us to do is to act like a kind of primary relationship manager, should you say, for financial institutions who don't understand or want to understand actually, or want to serve female micro entrepreneurs, but absolutely would like the consolidated balance sheet.
Right.
And so that's the kind of approach that we're taking, is that, you know, we can understand this market. We're able to sort of tweak and design the products. We've already got the community and the business building tools that kind of go around this. And the tech platform, say, really enables us to be very, very portable.
Yeah. Just, I like how you describe that. The need is everywhere. It's more like, you know, it's sort of, where to go next, because there's so much opportunity and so much need. We look forward to following your development and seeing where you do decide to go next. Yeah, really interesting. Thanks, Debbie, for sharing that. I like what you said about just making sure, though, that you're tailoring it to the needs of the market that you then decide to
Yes, and I think, you know, one of the things that is also very key is this kind of concept of community, which we've seen everywhere is kind of really important, sort of overcoming this loneliness, right? And we're
the
trying
social capital element of it. Yeah,
but we're trying to do it through Lucy as well. Lucy actually feels very much like your mate. That's what we wanted to be. Is like the
I recommend people visiting your website, welucy.com. Amazing, fantastic website.
And so it's all about sisterhood, I think. And what we're saying is we're trying to build a sort of global entrepreneurial sisterhood. That's the way I like to phrase it.
Oh, I like it. Let's leave it there. Let's leave that in people's minds. Perfect. Thanks, Debbie. Okay, over to you, Vineet. very keen to ask you the same sort of question. You know, how do you see what you're working on, Cred Avenue, or some of your other business ventures, how you might see that expanding to further benefit women? Like, you know, is it a new product? Is it unlocking another form of a digital? I don't know. Like, where do you see you going next to take more advantage of the business opportunity that is women SMEs or women borrowers?
So an area we're working on is how do we create very, very specific products that can bring in global capital markets into India. Now, the issue we have faced is that Cred Avenue today can attract only a very specific set of domestic investors who are also active on corporate debt in India. But a large pool of capital comes in from financial institutions or offshore funds or insurance companies. And it's important to rally them to the cause of women entrepreneurship and supporting that cause. Now, what we've done is that we have taken an asset management license in India. We are setting up a debt platform, an alternative investment platform, which can create, for example, specific funds that have thematic use of proceeds. And one such theme would be women entrepreneurship. Right now, we've seen this idea resonate because one, not only is India debt considered exotic, but people outside India have not really seen this kind of themes coming out of India, and nor have they really found the counterparties who can execute such a vision, such a product. Right now, given the scale that is already has built on Cred Avenue, today for us, finding the right and curated investment opportunity for a specific theme is the least of our problems. The problem is really around finding the right structure, finding the right risk appetite, and bringing that money into India, attracting them to a certain cost that we all believe in. Right. So that's an area we are working a lot towards. We are trying to use the Indian International Financial Center, a recent innovation out of India, to be able to set up funds that can raise money in dollars. We are trying to market our work on multiple forums, impact forums, as well as private debt forums, to be able to generate interest in a gender empowerment theme.
Right. I'm so sorry, Vinny. We're really now getting a bit short on time.
Sure.
So sorry, but I really like your idea of coming up with themes. That was a really interesting idea, and I look forward to seeing how you do that. And yes, please focus on female entrepreneurs. We would appreciate that. Thanks very much. Sorry, over to you, Russell, to give us a minute or two on how, just to give us a little bit more flavor on what you did with your solution, and then I'll hand over to Christine to close. But Russell, if you could just give us a minute or so to talk about a little bit more about your technology solution in Bank of Georgia, and then we'll hand to Christine. Russell, just a minute or so, sorry.
Okay. What we did is we, as I mentioned, we digitalized the inventory management and sales processes. And how we did it, we teamed up with Visa and Optimum, which is Georgian inventory management software. And Optima talks to one of the biggest retail marketplaces in Georgia, Extra.g. So we helped women-owned businesses digitalize their inventory management process and acquire additional selling channel, Extra.g. In addition to this, Extra has its own logistics and delivery system, and businesses who embraced this opportunity also got delivery and logistics service. The essence of our assistance was the first, we raised awareness of this opportunity. The second was that we provided onboarding services. And the third, we paid 6 months fee.
Wow.
Today we have 60 women-owned businesses on board. We expect that this number will become 100 until the end of the year. And the sales of these women-owned businesses increased by 10%, around 10%.
Wow.
So yeah, it's really exciting, my favorite project. And what I would like to tell you what these women do. They produced mostly jewelry and accessories, clothes, skincare product, furniture, and toys. And I would like to say 2 words about our future plans. We don't stop here. We have some plans to digitalize other processes, other business processes for women-owned businesses and help them move forward in these challenging times. And plus, we have plans towards educating them.
Super. Thank you, Rasuldan. And you did it in a few minutes, so I appreciate that. But you know, I can hear the impact it's had, and to think that businesses have grown and not gone down during the pandemic is truly impressive. So thank you. And I'll hand now over. Apologies, Christine, for you to close this fantastic session. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you so much to our great panelists, Debbie, Vineet, Vipul, and Rusudan. I really appreciate you joining us today. And thank you to also our audience. I hope that you found this stream very useful in terms of providing insights into how private sector banks and non-banks are really innovating and reaching out to women entrepreneurs. I think it's great to see how our speakers are so passionate about opening business opportunities for women borrowers. As the work of the WFX expands, we will support more financial institutions in their efforts to increase lending to women and women's businesses. And we look forward to hosting more of these webinars. And certainly we could go on at least for another hour or so with our panelists today. And I'm hoping to bring them back in for more in-depth discussion. So I will leave it at that today, and just also thank you to Amanda and Sabina for leading us through these interesting discussions. Thank you all again, and have a good afternoon and evening. Thank you.